Dr. Miriam Isaacs, our guest tonight, is retired affiliate visiting associate professor of Yiddish language and culture at the University of Maryland in College Park. She received her PhD in linguistics right here at Cornell in...
I won't say. 1971.
She's a veteran. She is a native speaker of Yiddish who has done significant research on contemporary Hasidic Yiddish, and among many other accomplishments, organized the first conference on displaced persons camps at the University of Maryland in 1999. I guess a moment when something that was just a topic that was known to the people who've been through it or heard about it in their family begins to emerge as an object of research in its own right, and those are always fraught and fruitful moments. Her engagement with the legacy of European Jewish survivors of Nazi genocide is also reflected in her current research project, Oral Culture in Transition, the Legacy of the Benjamin Stonehill Collection. While her lecture tonight focuses on the musical legacy rescued in the immediate post-war years, I understand it is also part of a larger and ongoing attempt to document and analyze the situation and responses of the survivors in those years, especially for the Stonehill Collection. At the moment, they're debarking a transatlantic crossing and arriving in New York. We are extremely fortunate to have tonight as well, it seems, for once, the entire Cornell University Klezmer Ensemble, or quite you, they, we are here in force, and I'm not a member of the ensemble, who will be performing some of the songs from the Stonehill Collection tonight. You are performing first, and then Dr. Isaacs will be presenting, and we will be performing again. So at the moment, allow me to welcome and introduce our own Cornell University Klezmer Ensemble.
Presentation, and I want to talk a little bit about the man who did the collecting, Ben Stonehill. Ben Stonehill was the youngest of 10 children, and he was born in Poland, but as a young child moved to Rochester, New York. And he grew up in Rochester, hearing Yiddish, but not really speaking Yiddish. And when he got to be around college age, some of his friends went off to a place called Cornell University, but that was around the time of the Depression. And he couldn't afford to go to college, so he came to Ithaca with his friends and learned a trade, learned how to install flooring. And with that trade, moved to New York City, started installing carpeting and flooring around Wall Street and places. Bought a place in Queens, in Astoria, Queens, and raised a family and a couple of sons, and became a lover of Yiddish. In 1948, most people who were attached to Yiddish understood what had happened, that a whole world had been destroyed, that the people in these displaced persons camps were probably the last speakers who would naturally speak to each other in Yiddish. Yiddish has always been a language that people spoke along with another language. So if you were in Poland, you usually spoke Polish, Russian, American English, and Yiddish was the internal language. So in the camps, in the DP camps, it was also an internal language because you had Jews from Hungary and Jews from Russia, Jews from Poland, and some later from the United States. And when they needed to communicate to each other, they spoke in Yiddish. Even Italian Jews like Primo Levi learned Yiddish in the camps because it became a necessary language. So in the DP camps that were mostly, ironically, in Germany, still in Austria and some in Italy, the United Nations oversaw these camps, And most Jews had no place to go. Most countries were still not letting Jews in after the war. And some of these camps kept going to well into the 1950s. So you can imagine what it feels like to be kind of stuck in Germany around the murderers of your family and sitting. I was born in such a camp. It was called Leipheim, and it was the barracks for the Messerschmitt, the Luftwaffe barracks that they put us into, which were not exactly luxury dwellings, and no country was letting us in. We finally made it to Canada, but through a ruse, actually, and it's another story. But we did eventually get out of Germany and to the New World. But it was a struggle. So in 1948, you start to see the beginnings of these survivors coming out with various languages, various skills, many of them very traumatized, many of them young. Because most of the children and most of the old people had been killed. So what you're left with is a relatively young population of an age when you would be courting. So a lot of them had lost, certainly their parents were orphaned, but also lost spouses, sometimes children, and were, by the time they got to New York, starting to look for new families to start. And actually, in the DP camps in Europe, you had the highest fertility rate in the world at the time. I'm the product. This is such a phenomenon. And they would refer to us children as Nakoma, that word, revenge. You know, Hitler wanted to get rid of all Jews, so guess what? You know, here we are. This is your worst dream. We're back. You know, so this is the hotel. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to show the next slide. I mean, it might be somebody hit that. Oh, thank you. All right, so here's a picture of Ben Stonehill with his two sons in Queens. And we had a launch for the website in May, and both his sons, now in their 70s, came for the website launch. And we're so excited to talk about their father and honor their father's collecting. He was very involved. There were a number of organizations that cared about Yiddish. The Workmen's Circle, YIVO, and in 1948, in the summer of 1948, there was a big conference to rescue Yiddish, and they brought in a number of artists and people, including a man named Shmerke Kaczerginski, who was a writer. Was in the Vilna Ghetto, escaped from the Vilna Ghetto, fought with the partisans, and while he was fighting with the partisans and living in the woods, he was also collecting songs and writing songs. And some of the best-known Holocaust songs were written by this Kaczerginski. There was also an actress by the name of Diana Blumenfeld who came and sang for Stonehill. And this, how do I make that noise happen? Okay. So this is Stonehill telling a child what a microphone is. He's explaining in Yiddish. Anyway, what he does is he tells this child, the sound is going to come out of your mouth and onto that wire, and then you can hear yourself again and it'll be preserved forever. And he foresaw that someday scholars would care about this material. And when he first finished collecting it in 1949, he offered it to a number of institutions and universities, and nobody wanted it. So that's him talking. Goes on to Will. You hear my voice coming out. Okay, that's good to know. So, yeah. So that's his voice. Actually, his grandson at one point wrote to me and asked me to send him an MP3 of his grandfather's voice, because his grandfather had died before he was born. What happened was, in 1949, nobody wanted, he had first envisioned writing a book, but he was a working man, so he didn't have time. So in 1949, nobody wanted it. He put these reels, 9 reels of wire, in his basement. And there they stayed until 1964. In 1964, he became aware of the fact that he was dying of cancer. And he better do something now. This was obviously very important to him. And there was, by that time, somebody at the Library of Congress, a woman named Ray Corson, who took this collection And together they transferred it. He oversaw it personally, transferring it from wire reels onto tape. So these tapes then went to the Library of Congress and were later digitized and shared with a number of institutions, including YIVO and the U.S. Holocaust Museum, which is where I obtained it, and Yad Vashem in Israel. And Yad Vashem has digitized it also for the Hebrew National Library. And if any of your technical people can figure out how I can listen to any of those, I would be most grateful. But right now, what I have is 39 hours of sound, and I've made about 200-300 MP3s from those 39 hours of sound. And what I've done is sorted them by theme, mostly, and started translating and transcribing them. And what we have here with the Klezmer University Klezmer Ensemble is 7 of those songs being performed for the first time in a long time. So let's see if I can make this happen. Look at that. No, it appeared here, but not. Oh yeah, is that right? Yeah. Okay. So this is in the DP camps. The survivors actually published newspapers. There were quite a few publications that were often done by hand, but sometimes on old typewriters in Latin letters. And this is a drawing from the Bergen-Belsen newspaper called Unsere Stimme, and you see here partisans coming through the woods and singing songs. So, and what I have to the left there is the names of some of the people who were involved in collecting. Ben Stonehill, Ruth Rubin, David Boder, Hannah Joseph Mlotek, Shmete Kaczynski, Diana Blumenfeld. So these are people who knew that this material was important, because although it's ephemeral, it's part of an oral tradition, it's part of a long-standing oral tradition, but all of these people then wound up in many different places. And so what you have here with these songs and what they say about the songs is very immediate. It's not like testimony that was gathered 10 or 20 years ago, but this is 1948. And 1948 was a really important year in many ways. The State of Israel had just been founded. People were still very much in transit. They hadn't quite, they were in America, but not really settled in America yet. Here's a picture of Shmete Kaczynski. And a number of his songs are recorded now. His songs are more easy to come by. And here we have, I think I can do this now. Here is a ballad. It's about a man named Botwin. It was one of the first songs that captured my attention. I never heard of Botwin, but apparently he exists in Polish Wikipedia. In the 1920s, he was a labor organizer, and there was a spy had come into wherever they were, and Botwin shot him right dead, right in the heart. He was immediately arrested, immediately executed, but became a hero to the Jewish socialists and communists and leftists. And a brigade in the Spanish Civil War was named after Botwin. And when I played this song in Sweden, where I was last year on the Fulbright, somebody in the audience jumped up and he said, everybody knows who Botwin is. He had come from Poland and grown up in communist Poland, and still to the Jews in communist Poland, Botwin was a known name. So here is, I'll play a little bit because we don't have much time. But listen, let's see. No, oh no. What have I done? A little arrow? There's a little arrow? Oh, that little arrow, okay. Okay, thank you. So Botwin was 18. He took part in the Kompartei, the Communist Party. At age 20, he was arrested. It's very soft, I know. In the city of the white police. It's already. Ah, there we go. You know what is not important? Let's go to the next one here. All right, but it's got many verses. So this one, Kaczerginski himself is singing, and it's one of my favorite songs. It's called Pack Up. And he says, pack up. We Jews are always being told to pack up. And he wrote this at a time when they were in the Vilna ghetto, and the Jews were being told that they were going to be moved to Riga. And many of them in Riga were just thrown into the ocean and killed. But they knew that the Soviet troops were near, and they were hoping that soon the Soviet troops would come in and tell the Germans to pack it up and leave. So this is a song of, resistance and hope and giving people courage. And he learned it from Sender Weizmann. This is Kaczerginski's voice. So he's talking about August 1933. So they were hoping. Okay, so, oh no, stop that. So he himself made it to New York, was lecturing in Buenos Aires, and died in an airplane crash in 1954. But between the end of the war and 1954, he published 2 books, and a lot of his songs are well known. Frühling, I don't know if any of you are familiar with that one, but it's an amazing, amazing song. So now I'm going to move on to the next slide, and let's see if we can make that happen. Oh, that thing, okay. Let's see. Okay, so this is another drawing from the Unsere Stimme. There was an artist who did a lot of these drawings, the Ponsek, and I'd like to know more about him. But here you see how the survivors, even after the war, they're still in their striped prison garb. To a lot of their rescuers, they looked like they were prisoners. They were emaciated, they were nervous, they were unhappy, they were complaining. So they learned very quickly to turn inward, to turn culturally inward for emotional support. So here you have the 3 of them holding each other up. So the song served many functions. You had this sort of DP camp subculture. They understood each other, they had lived through similar things. They spent a lot of time in those newspapers and in many other ways just looking for lost relatives, trying to find out what had happened to their families, trying to find out what had happened to their communities. From these newspapers, you start to get the gathering of material and information that later formed what were called Yisker books, memorial books. Because not only were people lost, but whole communities were lost. And people needed some way to mourn. They didn't have a graveyard to go to. They didn't have a tombstone to go to. They didn't know the dates that their family people, they didn't even know if family members died. So there was a lot that needed to be done to help them grieve. And music served an important function in that, as did writing, as did any kind of artistic expression. We tend to think that art is not important, but boy is it at times like this. It's not a frivolity, it's essential.
The newspaper is in the DP camp.
Yes, yeah.
But it's called Bergen-Belsen.
Yes, the DP camp was called Bergen-Belsen, yeah.
That's not
Yeah, same place, same barracks. Just,
The newspaper was Unsere Stimme. I understand, but the
Unsere
fact
Stimme.
that she listed it as Bergen-Belsen is...
Yeah, it was in Bergen-Belsen, yeah.
But
Unsere Stimme.
it wasn't during the Holocaust, it was post.
After. During, they weren't even allowed to have a
I was
pencil.
guessing, right.
Yeah. So this is Diana Blumenfeld. She had been a performer in the Warsaw Ghetto. and was active. You know, they used theater as a way to get people, you know, spirits lifted. And so after the war, she survived the war, performed in the DP camps, and then came and performed for Stonehill, and quite a number of songs that are in the archive are sung by her. And I just sent them off to the Center for Traditional Music Dance to be added to the website, so that should be happening soon. And she's a wonderful singer. Here is a lullaby. I'm going to do this right now. I am a quick learner.
Du bist mein Kind, mein Schein, wenn ich den Zeit will, sagt mir die ganze Welt ist mein Schloss, mein
So this is a lullaby. Okay, so a traditional lullaby. She does a lot of folk songs, and she does them as an actress would, you know, with a lot of meaning. So it's quite special to have this. This is a picture of the dining hall in the DP camp where my parents were after the war. My father wrote his memoirs, and he describes how they had to fight with the UN authorities to get to cook their own food. They had hired German help to come in and do the work, and needless to say, the Jewish women were not happy with that. So they had to stage a real protest and got to cook their own food. But you see here, you know, people sort of coming back to life. Women, some of the articles in some of the newspapers, you know, tell women how to put on nail polish and how to groom themselves, and you know, how to go on with life. And also, you know, it's a culture of reading and writing. Having been deprived for years of that, you see here in the DP camp photograph newspaper, a picture of a new baby, the Nakoma part, and part of it also is being informed about what's going on in the world and having opinions. So a lot of the articles, a lot of the newspapers, and a lot of the songs are very political. You know, there were not just Zionists, but 10 stripes of Zionists. You know, and you're sort of battling out old issues, but in a newer context. Trying to figure out what is the world about after all this? How can we make sense out of anything? And so they would write and argue and create a culture. So this is that. And this is what a barrack looked like. This is, I think, one of the ones in Lifetime. And then with the songs, I wasn't quite sure what to do with them at first. There was such a hodgepodge of everything. Religious songs, body songs, funny songs, old songs that people knew before but adapted, old songs that people knew before but not so adapted, brand new songs. What do you do to untangle that? So I'm an old folkie. Here at Cornell University, I went to hear Pete Seeger and Bailey Hall. I used to hang out with the folk scene. And I had a copy of Rise Up Singing on my table, and it was an aha moment. I can make a book and sort the songs thematically the way that particular book does. Because some of the themes work. There are love songs, and there are lullabies, and there are protest songs galore. So I started to create a book. And then it occurred to me that a website would reach more people than a book would. So I had a talk with Ethel Rain and Pete Rashevsky at the Center for Traditional Music and Dance, and they agreed to house the website. And so it's a work in progress. But those are some of the categories that I created. The first one that really came to me was songs about home and homelessness. Not having a home, having lost a home, looking for a home. Many, many songs that expressed that need in a very heartfelt way. And then lots of funny songs, because people were really ready to get on with life. They were tired of being unhappy, and so they would sing funny songs. Some of the funny songs are very dirty. I'm not quite sure what to do with them. They're really dirty. They're a bunch of guys kind of sitting in a hotel lobby with a microphone in front of them, and each one is outdoing the other. And most of the funny songs are about rabbis and their wives. So we have those as a category. I guess in terminology they're called blues songs. But then we have funny songs that are not dirty, like a song about playing football, or when one sort of imagines Tel Aviv when Messiah comes. That's kind of fun. And then lots of really nice religious songs. There's a wonderful version of Echad Mi Yodeya that I really like a lot in Yiddish. Some of them are children. Some of the singers are children, and some of them sing really well, which is really fun. And then lots and lots of philosophizing about the meaning of life and all that stuff, and what it means to be a Jew. One of the first songs I translated was Veilich bin a Yidel, zing ich mir das Liedele, because I'm a Jew. No matter what I do, you know, if I go out and earn money, they say I'm a crook. If I shave off my beard and pay us, they still know that I'm a Jew. It doesn't help, you know, so can't win if you're a Jew. So what does it mean? And then other sort of supporting Jewish identity, you know, sing Yiddish, love your language. Yiddish is as good a language as any language, so you have some of that there too. And then there's lots of, you know, people have a right to get cynical after times like that. And some of the songs complain. There's a wonderful song about Hitler, Mussolini, and Chamberlain. That's really quite clever. And a song about complaining about UNRWA, that a lot of the goods that are supposed to get to them somehow never get there. There were 7 cars on the train, and somehow 4 of them disappeared. And how did that happen? So anyway, so those are the categories, and that's the end of the PowerPoint. So thank you very much, David, for helping me with this, because we're going to have some more music now, and what I'll do is I'll explain what the songs say, and then they'll play them, and then we'll have time for questions. And this is a testament to the resilience of those survivors. Only 3 years after the war, sitting around a hotel in New York, and cheering themselves up and talking to each other and sharing. And here we've got this wonderful group has managed to take 7 of those songs and bring them back to life. You know, I don't know when the last time the Yiddish Lambeth Hop was actually performed. Here we are. So thank you so much. It's been such a great pleasure working with you. Questions?
Antwort.
Maybe next year we'll have another 7 songs. How about that? Yeah, question? Yeah.
Are there any songs that repeated itself?
Oh, yes. Yes, not many, amazingly enough, in such a large body, but one that comes up several times is even sung now occasionally, and it's about a parent in Lithuania that puts a child with Christian family, but is telling the child not to speak a Yiddish word, but to remember that Yiddish and to remember who he is. And so quite a few parents that had happened. They'd given their children to Christian families, and often the families didn't want to return the children, or they couldn't find them. And so this song was very potent. And only now, I think still, people in Poland are suddenly finding out that they really weren't born to their parents, but had been placed in care. So that particular song comes up a few times. Wohin soll ich gehen was really popular. Yeah, where shall we go? Who can answer me? Every door is closed to us. That right in that homelessness theme. So.
What about Leon Folt?
Huh?
The one who made the weird.
Wohin soll ich gehen?
Yeah.
It's not Leon Fuchs. No, it was originally the music came from. Forget, Brett Worm looked it up and we gave a whole paper at my conference about it, some king of tango, but then the words, no, not somebody Jewish, the music came from somebody who wasn't Jewish, and then the words were created for the Jewish situation, yeah.
So of the 7 songs, how would you contextualize those in terms of were they classics or new or?
No, most of them are, all of them are new. All of them, yeah, I don't know one of them that I see in any other collection. In fact, I just got an email from somebody in Australia, and there's somebody in Finland specializing in Holocaust music, someone in Australia, someone at the University of Wisconsin has been collecting music, and we're sort of talking about collaborating, but that's not happening yet. But there are three actually good-sized collections. There's Ruth Rubin collected a lot of material, and she and Stonehill actually communicated with each other back then. And there's a guy named David Broder who collected songs, and people are working with his collection. And so there probably is some overlap, but it's so huge. It's so huge. Because it was, it was an integral part of the culture. People sang. Men sang, women sang, children sang. That was how you conveyed your culture. So now we don't do that so much anymore, but then it was still very much a way, one of the things I want to write about more is what do these songs tell us? What do they tell us about the culture? What do they tell us about the times? What do they tell us about these experiences? There's one song that we didn't do, but I would like to, Dalken den Lager of Winkel by Nacht. This man is telling Stonehill he had written this song, composed it in his head, not written it down, because he wanted to go back to his rabbi back home, and he was afraid that it would be easier to remember things if he composed them. So he's talking about how he's in forced labor gang, and he's holding a shovel, and he's near a railroad track, and and he has lost all hope, and what is the point of all the struggle, and what is the point of all this work, and he sees a woman over there, and she's working hard, and what is the point of her struggling, and there's a child over there working, what is the, sort of repeating that, but really creating a sense of what it felt like to be a slave, knowing that murder, sort of followed that enslavement, so it's questioning, why are we doing this, and somehow he did survive. But it really, it takes you to a really dark place, and these songs, in this sad, sad way, are really timely. Look at how many people are in refugee camps and homeless and not knowing where they're going to be next week, next year. Don't know, often don't know what's going on with their family back home, scared, trying to carry on, trying to keep families going. So these songs sort of go into the emotional place, which is the most important place. A lot of people in Holocaust studies look at facts a lot, but it's harder to look at the feelings. But the feelings are central. The facts, all right, this many people died here, this many people died there, yes. But how did they feel? How did they feel before? How did they feel during? How did they feel after? What goes on? What does that tell you about the world? It's a harder place to be, but it's also very moving. Yeah. Yeah.
I know the song Bald bin Yiddish
Yes.
from in the camps, but he said there was a version from after the camps.
He sings it after the camp. Yeah, and it was probably written before. It's just the constant state of, because I'm a Jew, I get beaten up,
But the words that I know are different.
Yeah, there are two versions. There's one that was collected in the Lodz ghetto that is it's been recorded, and it's in and then there's this version, where the refrain is the same and the melody is the same, but the verses are different.
That's what I was.
Yeah. And I have both versions. Yeah.
Did Dona Dona originate from the Holocaust?
No. That's before, and it's socialist, and it's about, why can't you be free? Why can't you unchain yourself in these fetters?
Symbolically.
Oh, yeah, of course. Slaughter, There was somebody back there. Yes.
I guess I think I just missed the connection between the collector and the hotel and the lobby and what happened.
Yes, yeah, I went through that really fast. So what happened was, after the war ended, Jews were homeless. They couldn't go back. There were no homes to go back to. There was no place to go forward to. No country was letting them in. Poland was impossible, they were stuck in Germany. So there was this movement, all of Europe, not just the Jews, but it was chaos. So, and then there's books been written about, the Allies, and they divided up Germany, and in that division, at a certain point, they divided up refugees by nation. So they put all Poles together in one camp and all Lithuanians. But that didn't work because a lot of the Poles had been perpetrators. So it didn't work to have Polish Jews and Polish Christians in one camp. Poles could go back to their homes, Jews couldn't, and there was still violence. Germans were still attacking Jews in these camps in Germany after the war. There were big pogroms in Poland on Jews after the war. Jews were murdered in Kelts after the war and in other places. So things were not stable at all, and the Allies were trying to create some kind of stability. So what happened was, first you have these displaced persons camps, small ones and large ones, and just a lot of them. And then you start trying to, people trying to get to America or to anywhere. A bunch of them wound up in Australia, and a bunch of them we wound up in Canada. Some wound up in Mexico. It's just out of Europe. They really hated Europe. They would refer often to Europe as blood-soaked Europe. They had reached the conclusion that there was no future for Jews in Europe at that point, and they just wanted out of Europe. So many of them came, and when they could, if they had a relative that could sponsor you, or you had a special skill or whatever it is, so they were put temporarily in these hotels until they could get on their feet, and this was one of those hotels.
But what's the connection with the hotel and the collection of music?
Oh, so that's where Ben Stonehill put up a microphone.
Okay.
He had actually borrowed the equipment from a new company that had created these reel-to-reel tapes, and he was a good salesman, so he talked them into letting him borrow a demo model. And he set up, and he dragged it from Queens to Manhattan, and set it up early in the morning and stayed till late at night and just kept recording and recording and recording.
Was this just one instance, or like many instances, or?
Sorry?
Was this just one instance, or was this?
No, many. He did it over the course of a year and collected 1,000 songs.
I see, okay, thank you.
Miriam, do you want to take one or two more questions?
Yeah. Yes.
It seems to me that at this time there is a resurgence of interest in Yiddish, and Yiddish is entering the English language. I wonder if you could talk about that.
In 1948?
No.
No, now. When?
Right now.
Oh, right now, that's a whole other lecture. So I would say no. Yeah, I would say there's a little bit of interest and more acceptance of Yiddish, but I wouldn't call it a resurgence. I wish it were. Halavai. On that said, there's so much talent in terms of performers. Yes. Every time I go through New York, I just think there's so many talented performers. More in Europe now, ironically, than in the United States, really. Klezmer scene is really hot in Krakow and Germany, but I'm not quite sure what that's about. Books have been written, but yeah.
Most of these songs are obviously lauding Judaism and faith, but there must have been critics at the time, atheists created out of this.
Communists,
And,
yes.
And where are their songs?
Oh, they're in there. There's a guy named Vrumcha, and I'm going to make a whole folder just for Vrumcha, because his songs would tend to be more in the communist direction. They don't criticize the religion, because there's no point at that point in doing that. So it's really about what is a future? What is our future? What kind of future do we see? So some wanted a state of Israel. There's quite a few Zionist songs in there. Some wanted to praise the heroism of the Jewish fighter. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Zionist, but it's Jews, stand up for yourself. So the communist songs tend to sort of be in that vein. And they don't say, don't believe in God, because what's the point? Yeah.
Well, one could create a philosophy saying, how could there be just God?
Yeah, but
they
they
lived
didn't.
through all this.
You can talk about that, but they didn't sing about it. So I guess it doesn't make a good song. If you find one, let me know.
Thank everybody for coming. I want to thank you, Miriam. I want to thank the ensemble. This, as you said, this is presumably the first time
Yeah.
these songs have been sung
Since
live, let alone
1948. arranged,
performed. It is nakama. It is the best kind of revenge that there could possibly be, and it's the kind of thing that we love doing in Cornell University Jewish Studies program. It's even sweeter that it is a Cornellian teaching and working with
Oh, I have to tell you, my first time teaching Yiddish was at Cornell. While I was a grad student, I taught Yiddish at the Hillel here.
Well,
Then I taught Galicianisch Yiddish.
that's next on our agenda too. Thank you all so much.